It's that time of the week again to travel around the world in 25 minutes. Welcome to Foreign Dispatches. I'm Teniola Shobowale. On the program this week, wildfires ravaged the U.S. West Coast, devastating entire communities, just as scientists point out further evidence of rapid climate change. Plus, Brexit is back in crisis with the risk of a no deal. The U.S. West Coast is experiencing a historic wildfire season, and scientists and local officials believe climate change is to blame. But during his visit to California, President Donald Trump dismissed those claims, blaming forest management instead.
More than 1.6 million hectares of land burnt, several homes and communities destroyed, and more than 35 people killed, with many more missing. This is a devastation of wildfires in the U.S. West Coast. California, Oregon, and Washington have been the worst affected. Tens and thousands of residents have had to flee their homes. Three major U.S. cities, Portland, Seattle, and San Francisco, now have the worst air quality of any big cities in the world, thanks to the smoke from massive wildfires.
I was wondering what time it was, and then I looked outside and it looks like doomsday. I mean, you could tell something is horribly going wrong, and as far as going to work and breathing in all this pollution is definitely not healthy for us as in the Bay Area.
It feels like the end of the world. It's pretty scary.
Climate scientists say blazes like these are being made worse by climate change. The fire season is now 2 to 3 months longer than it was just a few decades ago across much of the West, and 6 of the top 20 largest fires in California history are currently burning. But as US President Donald Trump landed in California on a visit, he questioned the role of climate change, instead blaming poor forest management for the fires.
This is one of the biggest burns we've ever seen, and we have to do a lot about forest management. Obviously, forest management in California is very important. The management is very important. That's why you always have them here. When you think of it, you see it in Europe, it doesn't happen because they manage, well, it doesn't happen much. I'll have to be exact with you people, you understand that. But it doesn't happen much because they manage their forests, and they manage them brilliantly, and they've been doing that for many years. Other places it doesn't happen, where they manage their forests, and it should happen here.
The president's stance has drawn widespread criticism.
Facts are facts. Science is science. It's about acknowledging the science and acknowledging the facts that the hots are getting a lot hotter, the dries are getting a lot drier. We're still struggling through the last 5-6 years where we have been in drought conditions in this state. Climate change is real.
The comments also took center stage in the U.S. election campaign on Monday as Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden called President Trump a climate arsonist.
Donald Trump's climate denial may not have caused these fires and record floods and record hurricanes, but if he gets a second term, these hellish events will continue to become more common, more devastating, and more deadly. If you give a climate arsonist 4 more years in the White House, why would anyone be surprised if we have more America ablaze?
As the blazes in the U.S. West Coast rage on, firefighters on the front lines face challenging conditions, with shifting winds and drier weather sparking several new blazes. Scientists have warned for years that fire seasons like this could come to pass, and that the more we humans heat up the planet, the more we are increasing the odds in favor of the hot, dry conditions conducive to fires.
Echoing the rise in climate-driven fires, a massive wildfire has been burning in the Brazilian Pantanal since mid-July. Scientists warn that the fires have devastated a delicate ecosystem that is one of the most biologically diverse habitats on the planet.
The smell of burnt vegetation and the red glow of flames welcome visitors these days to the Pantanal, the world's biggest tropical wetlands, a biodiverse paradise that is now partly reduced to ashes by record wildfires. The Pantanal is smaller and less known than its famous cousin, the Amazon jungle. But the region's normally abundant waters and strategic location, sandwiched between the rainforest, Brazil's vast grasslands and Paraguay's dry forests, make it a magnet for animals. Biologists say fires are now threatening one of the most biodiverse ecosystems on the planet. The Pantanal is home to roughly 1,200 vertebrate animal species, including 36 that are threatened with extinction. Fire is not new here. For decades, ranchers have used flames to cheaply return nutrients to the soil and renew pasture for their beef cattle. But those blazes, fueled by drought, now burn with historic force, racing across desiccated vegetation. The Pantanal is known for being wet, not dry. The world's largest food plain normally fills with several feet of water during the rainy season from around November to April each year.
We haven't received water from anywhere. Without water, the fields are dry. They have dried up after receiving no rain for 3 months. We don't even know whether it will rain in September. I hope it does. Otherwise, what will we do? We are all suffering.
Scientists blame the drought on warming in the Atlantic Ocean just above the equator that's drawing moisture away from South America and will send it north, likely in the form of stronger hurricanes. There have been 62,627 fires in the Brazilian Amazon so far this year, an increase of 10% from the same period last year. No humans have died in the Pantanal fires. The victims are wildlife. Officials say while there are not exact counts, at a minimum, thousands of animals have perished.
From the sweltering Amazon to the Arctic Ocean, a massive chunk of ice, larger than the city of Paris, breaks off from the Arctic's largest ice shelf because of warmer temperatures in Greenland. While it's normal for pieces of ice to break off from a glacier, they are generally not this large. Scientists say the loss is further evidence of rapid climate change.
According to official reports, the vast and ancient ice sheet sitting atop Greenland has shared 113 square kilometers chunk of ice as at last month. A section of the Sport Glacier at the northwest corner of the Arctic island had been cracking for several years before finally breaking free on August 27, clearing the way for inland ice lost to the sea. With climate change driving up the Arctic temperatures, the once solid sea ice cover has been shrinking to stalk new lows in recent years. This year's minimum is expected to be the second lowest expanse in 4 decades of record keeping.
The new research is yet another important piece of evidence showing that it's really time we stop hitting the snooze button and wake up to the climate emergency. We need to curb climate emissions right now, immediately. And we need to create a network of ocean sanctuaries covering at least a third of the blue planet if we are to take climate crisis seriously.
According to new research published on Monday, August 14 in the journal Nature Climate Change, the long frozen region is already shifting to an entirely new climate regime marked by escalating trends in ice melt, temperature rise and rainfall days. All 3 variables, sea ice, temperatures, and rainfall, are now being measured well beyond the range of past observations. Scientists say that makes the future of the Arctic more of a mystery.
The climate in the Arctic is changing dramatically and rapidly, and it's changing so fast that it's transitioning to a new climate, where the new climate can't be predicted by the recent past. In other words, the Arctic has warmed so significantly that its year-to-year variability is moving outside the bounds of past fluctuations, signaling that it's transitioning to a new climate. And we often make predictions for weather given a climate boundary, if you will. You know, we don't expect the weather to go outside a certain boundary, but what we're doing is we're losing those boundaries, if you will, of what we expect in the Arctic. And granted, we know some things. We know that We have emissions. We know that the world is warming. We know that the polar regions are warming faster than lower latitudes. But we can't use the most recent past, the data that we have, to predict the future as easily.
Sea ice coverage minimums in particular are now around 31% lower than in the decade after 1979, when satellite observations began. The ice has also lost about 2/3 of its bulk, as much of the thicker ice layer built up over years has long since melted away. This vanishing of sea ice also contributes to the region's warming, as the icy white expanse is replaced by patches of dark water that absorbs solar radiation rather than reflecting it back to the atmosphere. The process, referred to as Arctic amplification, helps to explain why the Arctic has warmed more than twice as fast as the rest of the world over the last 4 decades.
Let's shift our focus to Brexit now. After a long break, the UK-EU divorce drama is back for its latest season, and a legal battle seems to be brewing. A dispute about the UK's plan to breach the withdrawal agreement has prompted accusations of bad faith, sending the relationship between the Brexit negotiation teams plummeting to an all-time low.
Downing Street wants to override elements of the withdrawal agreement that Prime Minister Boris Johnson signed with the EU in October 2019. The deal, a treaty of international law, compels firms moving goods from Northern Ireland to Great Britain to submit export declarations. It also gives the EU oversight on state subsidiaries handed to businesses in Northern Ireland that could have a knock-on effect for linked firms in the rest of the UK. The UK government wants to cancel both provisions and give ministers the power to decide on the state aid issue by overriding those sections of the withdrawal agreement with a proposed domestic law. The Internal Market Bill would pass its first parliamentary hurdle in the UK House of Commons. The bill was supported by 340 votes to 263. The Prime Minister says the legislation is a safety net.
Mr. Speaker, we cannot have a situation where the very boundaries of our country could be dictated by a foreign power or international organisation. No British Prime Minister, no government, no Parliament could ever accept such an imposition. But what we cannot do now is tolerate a situation where our EU counterparts seriously believe that they have the power to break up our country. And if that is what honourable members want them to have on the other side, then I'm afraid they're grievously mistaken. That illusion must be decently dispatched, and that's why these reserve powers are enshrined in this bill.
However, EU leaders have dismissed Prime Minister Johnson's argument, insisting he should uphold commitments he made himself in Brexit's treaty last year. The bloc is demanding that he withdraw the offending parts of the new bill by the end of this month, or risk a no-trade deal at the end of the year and potentially face legal actions.
This withdrawal agreement took 3 years to negotiate, and we worked relentlessly on it, line by line, word by word, and together we succeeded. And the result guarantees our citizens' rights, financial interests, the integrity of the single market, and crucially, the Good Friday Agreement. And the European Union and the UK jointly agreed it was the best and only way for ensuring peace on the island of Ireland. And we will never backtrack on that. And this agreement has been ratified by this House and by the House of Commons. It cannot be unilaterally changed, disregarded or disapplied. This is a matter of law and trust and good faith.
Scores of Boris Johnson's own Conservative MPs are also unhappy about the plan to breach international law, out of fear that it sends the wrong signals and could reduce the UK's standing in the world. Their concerns have been boosted by condemnation from 5 former prime ministers who also warn of the risk of the law to the UK's global reputation. As Prime Minister Boris makes his case to MPs, the crunch comes on Tuesday, that's September the 22nd, when the front-runner amendment about government plan will be voted on.
As a handful of countries continue to experience a dramatic drop in the number of daily coronavirus cases, many are taking the bold step of reopening schools. Like elsewhere in Pakistan, children aren't going back to the same learning environment they left months ago. Face masks, social distancing and washing of hands have become the new normal.
Higher education institutions and secondary schools in Pakistan on Tuesday, September 15, welcomed back the first batch of students in a phased reopening after a 6-month break due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The government has issued a 27-page document containing guidelines for the return of the students. The measures include temperature checks, social distancing, hand washing, face coverings and improved ventilation. Students of each class will also be divided in equal batches and attend school on alternative days.
Since we have been given the opportunity to resume our sessions physically, we must follow all the regulations very strictly because the safety of these children is in our hands.
After 6 months of online learning, the students are glad to be back in the classroom.
Online classes are not as interesting as real-life classes because during regular classes, when we don't understand anything, we can easily ask the teacher to explain further. But this was not so easily done in online classes. So this is a very good decision by the government, and we're very grateful to the school authorities for reopening our school.
As part of the government's phased reopening following a fall in new coronavirus case numbers across the country, schools for classes 6 till 8 will open on September 23, and on September 30th, primary schools will follow suit.
After a 6-month shutdown, the longest in Europe, schools in 13 of Italy's 20 regions cautiously resumed face-to-face lessons, calling back 5.6 million students to their desks. However, teachers aren't particularly happy, as they say the government haven't delivered on some precautionary measures.
No hugs, no kisses, no walking hand in hand in corridors. Instead, temperature checks at the entrance, single desks, hand sanitizers and protective masks are waiting for the children. The new strict social distancing policies imposed by Italian authorities to curb the spread of the virus represented a tough challenge for children and parents who returned to school with concern but also with hope.
I explained to my 2 daughters that they need to avoid contact, kisses and hugs, but I don't want them to live in terror because I don't think they need to. They have to be careful, but in the end, we should remember that they are children, so we have to make them understand that things will get better.
The strict new set of procedures include shifts and rotations of students at the exits and entrances, designated COVID rooms, and designated COVID staff members. Teachers were excited to meet their pupils again after more than 6 months, even if they had to find new ways of interacting with them.
Our greatest fear, in addition to the fact that cases of COVID-19 may show up, is the difficulty of working in these conditions. At primary school, we were used to working with children seated in a circle, with children drawing posters in groups. I was used to entering the classroom and reading a book to children sitting in a circle on the ground. Now, we can't do all these things, so it will be difficult for us to find new ways.
Schools say students with the slightest symptoms of a cold or fever must stay home. Face masks are mandatory for all students over the age of 6 when they're on school premises, except for in gym class or when eating in canteens and answering a teacher. Teachers, other staff and parents will be required to wear face masks inside the school premises. Battling to halt the spread of the virus, the government shut the nation's schools in early March, which led to the longest shutdown in Europe. However, efforts to make classrooms safe again and limit the possibility of a fresh outbreak has been mired in controversy. Unions say many of the new 2.4 million single desks needed to guarantee social distancing have failed to arrive in time, while thousands of teaching positions remain vacant and older staffers have expressed worry about the risk they face.
Well, educationists around the world seem to be on the right track as the World Health Organization praises teachers and administrators for their efforts to get children back to school. The UN agency calls on the rest of the world to support that work in their own behavior, saying school closures must be the last resort.
According to United Nations Children's Fund, at the height of the pandemic lockdown, 1.6 billion children in 192 countries were shut out of school. However, the latest data show that 872 million children in 51 countries are still unable to go back to the classroom, and 1 in 4 countries have not yet specified a date for when schools will reopen.
Half of the global student population is not yet back in schools. The longer schools remain closed, the more damaging the consequences, especially for children from more disadvantaged backgrounds who, in addition to learning, rely on school for health, for safety, and sometimes for nutrition.
Director General of the WHO, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, says the closure of schools should be a last resort and stresses that everyone has a role to play in ensuring schools can stay open.
Given the devastating consequences on children, youth, and our societies as a whole, the decision to close schools should be a last resort, temporary, and only at a local level in areas with intense transmission. During school closures, continuity of education should be guaranteed through distance learning. The time during which schools are closed should be used to put in place measures to prevent and respond to transmission when schools reopen. Keeping children safe and at school is not a job for schools alone, or governments alone, or families alone. It's a job for all of us working together.
New guidance on the reopening of schools from the WHO and UNICEF states that to ensure schools remain open, authorities must keep transmission down by the usual methods of testing, tracing, tracking, and isolating. In addition, schools should ensure staff and students maintain physical distance of at least 1 meter and consider introducing staggered start and finish times, increase hand-washing facilities, and ensure adequate ventilation.
In an innovative attempt to mitigate the mental health issues of COVID-19 patients, a hospital in India has deployed Mitra, a robot to help in counseling patients. Mitra patrols the wards of the hospitals, connecting coronavirus patients to friends and relatives. Take a look.
Mitra the robot patrols the wards of India's Yatat Hospital, offering comfort to lonely COVID-19 patients. It connects the infected patients who have been under treatment at the hospital away from their families with their loved ones on video calls. The calls are made using the screen on the body of the robot. Mitra, meaning friend in Hindi, is best known for interacting with Prime Minister Narendra Modi at an event in 2017. Its piercing eyes are equipped with facial recognition technology to help it recall people it has previously interacted with. A tablet attached to Mitra's chest allows patients to see their loved ones, as well as medical staff unable to access the wards.
The bad part is that it takes a lot of time to recover from this, and during that time, when the patients need their families the most, they are unable to visit. And that has a negative impact on their psychology. So how we try to address that is that everybody is allowed their own phones. So we arrange for video chatting with the family, and as you would see, we've got a robot where on the screen they can have a teleconsultation with a psychiatrist if needed.
Mitra is mainly used by patients who are not able to communicate using their phones.
It gets depressing mentally, but it is reducing. Since I got to know that my son tested negative for coronavirus, I am feeling great.
The robot, developed by Bengaluru-based startup Inventor Robotics, cost the hospital 1 million rupees. The robot is also being used for remote consultations with specialists to reduce the risk of becoming infected.
And that's Foreign Dispatches today. Don't forget that you can keep up with all our top stories on channelstv.com. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Teniola Shobowale. See you next time.